So the debt that's being projected within the 10-year plan is a total of 150 million on infrastructure. And that takes you to a level of debt which I suspect is more than this community can afford. And that when I suggested that an approach to central government may be the only way to go, that's on the basis at the moment, my advice is that there are 7 consents that have expired and haven't been picked up, resource consents, and I see people nodding. One of them goes back to 2002 in Shannon, and that's a deplorable state of affairs. So I have said to people already in the day that I've been here, that to me it becomes not just a community affordability issue, it becomes a tangata whenua, it becomes a local community issue that has got public health at risk. Not just the economic aspects of having a decent water supply and wastewater, but it's public health. If you're having to boil your water, well, sorry, that's a DHB issue. It's a Ministry of Health issue. It's a central government issue, and I would be in the ear of your local MP mercilessly, starting to drop that in if you haven't done already. Because if it's going to get done at the level that is proposed, then that's where the assistance is going to be required. Now, I'm not rating your chances extremely highly, but obviously if you're at the bottom of the league table, that's probably a point where you say, well look, this community needs some assistance. This 10-year plan projection, which they call the Manhattans, that is the skylines of the peaks of expenditure and debt that accompany the 10-year plan, was so scary that somebody in the council, I suspect it was the man himself, said, oh well, we will stretch that to 20 years. Well, that is an absolute nonsense, and I'm quite happy to be quoted on that, because the problem's not going to get better by addressing it in 20 years' time. It could well be twice as bad. So that's just cosmetic accounting. It further does. Now, in fact, some sort of stretching might be inevitable because of the limits of funding. But just to say, oh no, we're going to move the goalposts because it looks better and go from a 10-year period of spreading the income and the debt to 20 years is to ignore the actual facts. The consents are in a deplorable state now. It should be done tomorrow, not in 20 years' time. How much worse will it be in 20 years' time? But we totted up the feel-good projects. Now this is perhaps I will stretch my neck a bit, or stick my neck out a bit. There has been roughly $40 million paid in this district in the last 10 or less years for community projects. Nice to have stuff. Only problem is that some of that has either taken funding that would be available for essential infrastructure, cost-effective, community-based infrastructure for future generations, okay? And I make no comment about the advisability of spending the money that they have spent. But those are assets, supposedly, that have the flavour of liabilities, because many of them come with a negative cash flow in terms of revenue. It's not as if you're building a public utility asset that you can have a targeted rate income to service the debt or whatever it is. So, you know, for a swimming pool, you're lucky to get 50 cents in the dollar in terms of the return of the entry fee. In Auckland, for example, our mayor currently is allowing people to get into the swimming pools for nothing. Now, you extend that to, is it Takari? Takari? Now, I walked through there yesterday and I was absolutely amazed at an expensive facility that I couldn't imagine the minuscule income coming off that. And now it's a community asset and people might say, well look, we've got to provide something for the kids. Fair enough. But in the meantime, what's happening at the lake, what's happening down Queen Street Drain, you know, these are the things that, but often what we see is wheeled up as a fait accompli for a rubber stamp from the elected members, just the one favourite proposal that's been crafted together in the back offices of the officers concerned. That's what you're saying. But there is some good news, not only, in my humble opinion, with the change of the purposes clause, but also for the first time in at least a decade, the CEO is now no longer the totally top-level, unchallengeable kingpin. And the reason for that is because they have introduced legislation in 2012, same legislation that changed the purposes, to say that now elected members, and I think this starts July 1, that's coming up. No, when was it? Last week. The balloon's gone up, folks. Elected members now are empowered by the legislation to take a direct hand in payroll and staff numbers. A big hooray for that. Now, that means that that particular governance and audit committee needs to be very well informed in that area, because there's a lot of fish hooks, and don't you worry. I've been in there and done some. For example, what is a full-time equivalent? Not defined. So how many consultants are really effectively full-time employees but are not on the head count? So there's all this other BS floating around. But at least it's a sign that the CEO's unchallengeable situation is altering. And I can see that that may be a case where, without having elected members back to the point where they were meddling in the potholes, remember that? But we can somehow get a compromise and a best endeavours basis of people working sensibly to remove some of this autocratic power that's been given to the CEO, perhaps in other areas too, so that we get a better balance, because there have been situations where CEOs acting in an autocratic manner have basically abused the consultative process. We saw that in Kaipara, and Kaipara's ratepayers are going to court next month in Whangarei as a result with the judicial review. And a lot of that came from the secret meetings of the A-team, of the consultants in the engineering area, the CEO and the mayor, and nobody else knew Dicky Bird about it. I've been left to lie. Now, as for what, and I will use some strong terms here, Tim Shadbolt actually had to front the magistrate years ago for the use of the word bullshit. And I fervently hope that I'm not ending up in court by the use of that word, because it describes what I would call bullshit castle on State Highway 1. That is an obscenity. That is a blot on the landscape, when incidentally, when a minister of the Crown comes by in his limousine and sees that on State Highway 1, and the next day he receives a deputation from the council for some assistance with a wastewater scheme, what's likely to be their reaction? And I mean, to me, you can do business for local government with some distributed service centres, a regulatory department, and you can do it out of a Quonset hut if you needed to, or a prefab. That particular statement on State Highway 1 says everything that has been wrong with Horowhenua over the last 10 years. It is so much in your face. So I urge you sometime, when you've got nothing better to do, to take a walk or a drive, park opposite that building, look at it for 5 minutes and just ponder the significance of it. Because if I can get that message across, then this district will set its face in a new direction. And we'll say, less of the bullshit castle, let's clean up some of the bullshit, would be a better way to go. I drive around the district yesterday, and it was very revealing, because I can see so much potential with simple areas that can be cleaned up. Obviously the lake is the principal one, but there's also stuff that can be done at that grassroots community level, and that's the way things have got to go. I mean, don't spend any more dollars than you can help on anything other than cleaning up the mess that's there at the moment in the public utilities area.